And joining me now is Senator Mark Kelly, Democrat of Arizona, member of the Armed Services Committee. It's good to have you here.
Good to be here.
It's a little weird to be called a traitor, I think, by Elon Musk twice. What's your response?
Well, he's the richest guy in the world. When I was flying combat missions over Iraq, and he was probably a teenager, I didn't think, a guy from South Africa, richest man in the world, would call me that. But I will say I'm not really bothered by it. But what really bothers me, it's not what he says, it's what he's doing. And I have really, grave concerns about seniors in my state. When somebody calls Social Security a Ponzi scheme, especially him with his power, that means that program is under threat. When veterans are fired from their jobs, we have so many veterans that after they serve, they go to the federal government. They get a government job, a good job. Veterans are well equipped to do these jobs. They're mission oriented. They work hard. They've already served their country. This is a second opportunity for them to do that. These are valuable employees. I had about a dozen of them in my office a few weeks ago. One guy was a disabled veteran. He had recently received a performance report that said he was doing great. 3 weeks later, he gets an email from Elon Musk, and he's fired for poor performance. This guy told me this has ruined his life. He had kids. He was about to start a minimum wage job.
That point you made, the federal judge, the district judge who's overseeing the lawsuit about this firing, one of the points the judge made was, first of all, they know it wasn't for poor performance. They used it as a loophole. Right. But second of all, you now have this black mark. They know it's a lie, but you now have been fired for performance. So you now have to answer on your next job interview. Have you been fired for performance? Right. What happened at your last job? Yeah. With this essentially lie that the Doge boys cooked up.
Yeah, well, hopefully these folks will be able to explain it. Hey, I'm in this huge group, especially if you're a veteran. He fired at least 6,000 veterans. That's the last time I checked. That was a couple of weeks ago. Maybe those folks will be able to talk about that. But you're right. This is not helpful for them. And it is one sad story after the next, and it's not making us more efficient. If you're talking about the E is efficiency and Doge, try to figure out where do we have redundancy? Where do we have programs that aren't necessary? U.S. government aid, the food aid that we send to starving kids, the support for programs that help strengthen democracies in other nations, that's money. If we don't spend that money, at some point we're going to have to spend more money on bullets.
That point you just made, I want to stay on this for a second. One of the things I've seen is look, USAID may be good, but it's kind of people, they're skeptical of foreign aid, and you can't really make the case. You're a senator who's in a swing state, a hotly contested state. Do you feel like you can just talk to people, whatever their politics are, and make a affirmative case for why USAID is actually important and shouldn't be shuttered?
Well, we're the richest nation in the history of the world. There are starving children all across this planet. I've been in a refugee camp in the DRC, in the Congo, and seeing starving kids. And these are kids that are now in a camp where there was care and UNICEF and food aid that comes from USAID. And some of them, I remember this baby with the distended belly. And I asked the doctor, well, this kid's going to be okay. And he said, not this kid. Those kids over there, because we got here in time, because they got here in time, this baby here will die. And if that food aid wasn't there, these other kids would have died as well. There are kids in Sudan and in other countries across the planet right now that are dying because Donald Trump and Elon Musk decided to stop this aid. And that hurts us. That makes these places less stable. When you have instability, and it might seem like to most Americans it's in a faraway place and it doesn't affect us. The Russians are there in Africa. The Chinese are there in Africa. They are promoting this chaos in these foreign places. Ultimately, that spreads to the rest of the part of the world, and we wind up, as the United States of America, trying to help in these conflicts, and that does affect us.
Let me ask you another question about national security. I was struck by this very well-reported piece in the Times about the Signal chat leak. This was talking to particularly military pilots about their reaction to it. One former senior Defense Department official with military experience said Mr. Hegseth's test describing launch times and the type of strike aircraft was indeed classified information that could have jeopardized pilots' lives if it had been released or obtained. I saw a few viral TikToks of military spouses expressing rage about this. What do you think as a former naval aviator yourself?
Who had to walk out to an airplane in the middle of the night to go on a strike like this when Dick Cheney was Secretary of Defense, I think. Never for 1 second did I think the Secretary of Defense was going to put me at risk. And it is significant risk. They're saying this wasn't classified. This is the most sensitive information we have in the military. When you're going to send service members, troops, pilots, feet dry in this case, over land in a contested area where they have a significant surface-to-air missile capability.
Yeah,
they have SA-3s, SA-6s.
Yeah.
I've had an SA-6 blow up next to my airplane on my first combat mission.
Wow.
That missile can shoot down an F-18 without a doubt. If they know you're coming, when you're coming, the direction you're coming from, and on top of that, the time on target, they know to have all their resources focused on shooting you down. And that helps them significantly. So, of course, these pilots are upset about it. Pete Hegseth put them at significant risk. He crossed a line no Secretary of Defense should ever cross, and he needs to be held accountable for this.
What do you make of the lying? I really find this part, in some ways, some of the most unnerving. I mean, to say it's not classified, it's like, well, the timing and of a surprise.
I'm not even sure what they mean by that. Maybe they meant because it doesn't say secret or top secret on the signal chain.
Right, but of course it is.
Of course it is. It came off of a piece of paper that probably said top secret at the top, or he got it over the phone from the head of CENTCOM, the combatant commander, that said, here's, and by the way, you look at the times, it wasn't around a certain time. It's like 15:16, 3:16 p.m., or 14:10, which is 2:10 p.m. These are exact times that came from a plan. Now, they're saying, well, these aren't war plans. I'll give them that. I mean, a war plan would be joint forces.
Sure, yeah.
It would include allies. This is a strike plan. These plans, by the way, are also planned by those pilots that are in the cockpit. So they planned the strike.
Right.
They communicated it to leadership. It got approved. And then the Secretary of Defense decides to throw it out on an unsecured platform, which, by the way, could have gotten to the Russians, could have gotten to the Iranians, and ultimately to the Houthis.
It also struck me that Jim Himes, Democratic congressman, said this the other day, that, there was no real reason to do it. That it was almost kind of showing off. He didn't have to send that
100%.
That way, right? Is that right?
Or he could have sent it afterwards.
Right.
If that would have come out 15 minutes after those airplanes got back to the aircraft carrier, those guys were safely aboard. If you want to send that stuff out, fine. That information is not valuable to anybody anymore. Not really. But to do it beforehand is such a disservice to what these guys are about to do. And I'm confident, I'm sure their spouses are upset. It is risky to go fly an airplane into enemy territory and try to get bombs on target and then get out before you get shot down. And now you have the guy in the highest position in DOD is making that job potentially making that job so much harder for you.
There is reporting today that he's hired his brother at the Department of Defense, Pete Hegseth,
to do
liaison, I think, is what he's doing.
What's his brother's background?
I think he might have had a podcast company. Don't quote me on that. I think that's what it was.
This
is a guy who said he's going to bring Merritt back to the Department of Defense, fired the chair of the Joint Chiefs because he was too woke, I guess. Black man who talked about being black in America.
Yeah.
And do you think he's restoring merit to the Department of Defense?
With hiring his brother, who probably needed a job, or maybe gave him a raise from his previous job, or wants to have his brother around. How could his brother possibly be the most qualified job for whatever this is? Whatever this job happens to be. It's not his brother. If you need somebody in this position, advertise the position and find the most qualified person. This is the Department of Defense we're talking about. This is the organization that keeps all of us safe.